Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for the next session, which is again a very important theme for today, which is innovation for digital innovation, privacy engineering to enable digital innovation. And for this particular panel, we have an elite panel set up. I would now like to request one by one the panelists to join us. So I will start with requesting Ivana Batuleti to join us. She is the Global Chief Privacy Officer with Wipro Limited. Hi, Ivana. Thank you for joining.
Thanks
Next,
to you.
thank you. Next, I would like to welcome on stage Tejasvi Adagada. He is the Data Protection Officer with Axis Bank Limited. Hi, Tejasvi. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, Sukrit.
Up next, I would like to welcome Sabrina Sampath. He is the Chief Strategy Officer with Wire 19. Thank you, Sabri, for joining us.
Pleasure to
And
be here.
last but not least, let me introduce everyone to the moderator of the day. His name is Nitin Dhavat, and he's the country head data privacy officer of Novartis. So, Nitin, I would like to join. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And like we discussed earlier, over to you, please, and please take the session forward. And I would be backstage for any support or through. So here's wishing all of you the best for a great session ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, Sukrit, and hello everyone. Thank you and welcome to this panel discussion on privacy engineering to enable digital innovation. As Sukrit mentioned, we do have a great lineup of panelists today, and as a panel, we would like to thank DSCI for having us. To set the context a bit on the topic itself, we are all aware that privacy laws started coming into force around 50 years back. It started sometime in the 1970s. Some of the EU countries, Sweden to start with, Germany followed. They came up with their privacy laws way back in the 1970s. OECD came up with their privacy principles, I believe, sometime in the 1980s. We had the Data Protection Directive in the 1990s. Other countries followed suit, and more than 3 years back, GDPR came into force. Closer home, just yesterday, we had the Joint Parliamentary Committee submitting their long-awaited report to the Indian Parliament, and hopefully sometime next year we will have a strong data protection law in India as well. But if you look at all these privacy laws, a lot of them have overlapping and sometimes I would say conflicting reports or requirements as well. And then there are some conflicts with the sectoral laws in some cases as well. They come with their own set of cross-border transfer requirements. But as compared to that, if you look at privacy engineering, I think it's a relatively new development. So today what we will do in the first part of the session is to understand really what privacy engineering is all about. Is it privacy by design in practice? Is it the technology arm of privacy laws, or is it something else? So that's something we'll try to explore today in our discussion. On the digital innovation side, we see that there's a lot of change all around. Okay? So be it private businesses, be it governments, the way they are conducting their business models, the amount of data which is available to them, and the modes of engagement with their customers and consumers is changing quite a lot. Right? If you look at it from the customer or the consumer perspective, there's a change in their expectations, how their data is used transparently in a trustworthy way. Their awareness about privacy itself is increasing as we speak. If you look at the regulatory landscape, we already have seen that it has evolved over the last 50 years or so. Most of the privacy laws now have privacy by design as one of the key requirements to be met by governments or by businesses as well. On the technology side, we see a constant evolution, and that will keep happening down the line as well. So we have IoT, we have AI/ML, we have 5G, which is coming into picture now, and these technologies bring with them their own set of, I would say, challenges and opportunities when it comes to compliance. And I think beyond that, how do you use these laws? How do you use privacy, maybe engineering, to differentiate yourself, to bring in innovation as well? So overall, I think this climate of change begs a climate of innovation, and we are all aware that pandemic has only kind of accelerated the drive towards digital innovation. So with that as the backdrop, I would maybe first turn to Ivana to understand or ask a very basic question, I would say. I mean, what is privacy engineering? What does it mean to you, Ivana? What is your take on it? So over to you, Ivana, first.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And it's really exciting to be joining you as the Global Chief Privacy Officer for Wipro, and I'm in sort of month 3 of my role, which I'm absolutely enjoying it. So it's really good to be able to join you in this capacity. You say, Nitin, that is a very basic question, and I'm not sure that defining privacy engineering is a very easy question. But I want to start, if I may, Nitin, just picking up on your amazing introduction to this panel. And I just wanted to say, to mention a couple of things. The first one is, you're totally right when you mentioned the proliferation of privacy legislation across the world. Not last, what you were mentioning today, just now about India and what happened yesterday. And obviously, what is going to happen in India is in the new privacy bill, which we will see hopefully in not too late, is really important because it will set the scene and it will change the dynamics very much on a global level. I think there are 3 main things that are pushing very much for privacy engineering, and I'll come to that in a second. First one is the new requirements that Nitin were mentioning on data transfers. So what we're witnessing is a lot of new expertise coming up and new stuff happening around, for example, new cryptographic ways to share data at a global level, trying to bring together the strict requirements that are being introduced, not just in Europe with Schrems 2, but also across the globe. The second one is not just about the privacy laws. There is a lot of addition to legislation that are bringing a strong requirements for this. Think about, for example, algorithmic management. Think about the requirement for fairness, transparency, and explainability enshrined in legislation all across the globe. In Europe, for example, there is the European AI Act. But if I think about Brazil, if I think about India, if I think about China, everywhere when it comes to algorithm, the requirements for transparency, which are ultimately privacy law requirements, are absolutely important, and they require strong technological innovation. But also there is one other thing, which is the stronger demand for control that is coming from the general public. When people, when customers, when citizens, they're given the chance to choose, they choose and they opt for privacy. So as you said, there is a big competitive edge in bringing together innovation and privacy. And this is where, in my view, privacy engineering comes in. Not easy to define, and I'm sure we will find very different people with different backgrounds, coming to this from a different perspective. And this is why the first point that I really want to make here is that crucial in the age we live in, where we understand that regulation, policies, privacy notices, alone will not be sufficient to guarantee the respect for privacy that we absolutely need. And we need far more than that. So what is really, really important is to bring together teams coming from different perspectives to develop a common vocabulary around these issues. Lawyers, privacy professionals, engineers, it's really important that people understand that there are more blurred lines between these professions as there haven't been before. So obviously we need systems, that we can trust to really implement the privacy policies that we want to establish. And also we need new technological tools and new systems to make sure that we can enable choices, informed choices from people. But also we need to really understand what we're dealing with. So the humans and the customers and the clients that interact with our systems. So the understanding around privacy engineering is, in my view, rooted into this different dimensions. And that goes from anything that, for example, is how do you architect privacy to, for example, bring together different forms of consent, to also how do you do things, how do you facilitate data retention and data deletion, how, for example, you create very user-friendly user interfaces. And this is really, really important, especially as there is a lot of criticism around dark patterns and the nudging technologies that bring people into giving consent. And what we're witnessing at the moment is that all of this is really bringing together sort of academia, industry, and not just that, but also, user-driven initiatives. So I think to solve what I consider to be sort of privacy engineering issues, but in order to deploy all of this within organizations, what is really, really important is to look at what is the vocabulary. How do we enhance cooperation between different teams? And if we are going to, for example, purchase privacy technologies, which is very much on the rise at the moment, there's a proliferation of startups offering all sorts of things. How do we make sure that that is actually working and that does what it promises? So in a nutshell, and to close on this, privacy engineering to me is how do we make sure that we can engineer and code and architect the privacy that we want from a privacy by design approach to embed in the structure, in the architecture, in the choice that we grant to our users, to our platforms. So to me, and this may be my own personal view, but to be privacy engineering follows directly from the privacy by design and by default approach, which is a legal requirement across very much of the privacy laws at a global level. And it follows from that and informs, because it answers the questions on how we can engineer some of these privacy by design requirements into the systems that we create, that we put in place. In order to do so, then we really need to think about how, if the governance around privacy that we currently have in our organizations is fit for purposes, as we really need to speak a common language on this.
Thanks, Ivan. I think a couple of key points which I heard you talk about. One is the kind of common language between multiple stakeholders, allowing data subjects to have control, actual implementation methodologies, privacy by design, if you will, right? So thanks for your insights on this. I do want to open this up to Tejasvi and Sabri as well before we move on to other points, to share what their perspective is on privacy engineering, just like what Ivana talked about her perspective. Tejasvi, Sabri, do you want to quickly share your thoughts on what privacy engineering has meant to you and what are your thoughts on that?
Sabri, I can go first.
Sure.
Well, in fact, Nitin, I think that has been an excellent opening from Ivana. I like the way where she, in fact, translated the aspects of engineering, specifically from legal and regulatory requirements. At the outset, we have been talking about engineering privacy and having to ensure that the customers, in fact, are given preference when it comes to their own data. And at the outset, organizations are nothing but custodians of this personal data of customers or data subjects, be it leads. And at the outset, there are certain questions which in fact can be answered through technology. And that is what is the science of privacy engineering, which in fact means that we are cautiously embedding technology and making active management of privacy an easy and an unburdened aspect to be governed within an organization. And at the outset, I think I have set up myself on this journey for the past 2 years, and specifically, multitude of digital changes that are going within the organizations. We can in fact get to sense that there is a digital transformation, as everyone has been stating. And it has accelerated over the past 1 to 2 years due to the pandemic. And in fact, the customers started embracing digital channels apart from the native channels. So specifically when it comes to banks, people started having to embrace, mobile banking or internet banking rather than having to step into the branches to service perhaps certain needs like having to do a money transfer or getting a checkbook generated. So all of these digital changes, which in fact are perhaps going in through an organization, change process. It in fact means that there is a certain team which is set aside, which in fact is privacy ops, that needs to get through each of these changes. They need to assess the risk associated with the change. It can be something like having a customer transact over a third-party channel, but having to give this data over to the controller, which in fact can be a bank, and having to have these risks identified by the privacy ops, and further having to do a records management on who is the risk owner or the data owner, what are the entitlements around this personal data, like a customer date of birth, and how in fact these are getting translated into system level access controls, which is nothing but data security as a dimension if you were to quote it. Now, all of these aspects can in fact be made seamless if there is a risk or a privacy automation tool that can make it much easier to create a workflow, that can assign roles and responsibilities to data owners or risk owners, that can help curate all of these risks together and help track them to a closure. So this is something which I felt that could tremendously ease out and make it unburdened for privacy operations, and can be enabled by the privacy engineering group. And at the outset, there is $1 million question again. There is a privacy management and engineering. Does privacy engineering have to sit within the first line of defense with software engineering and data engineering, or should it be in the second line of defense? So these are certain thoughts which in fact I think are still to be solved. These are thoughts, but these are questions which need to be solved for. We can extend on these thoughts further, but I would like to give it over to Nitin yourself or Sabrina.
Yeah, thanks, Tejasvi. And Sabri, your thoughts to continue with the same question, what is privacy engineering? And then we'll move on to other aspects of this as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Nitin. I couldn't agree more with what Tejasvi and Ivana mentioned earlier, at least in terms of covering all the aspects and bring that structured framework, right? Because privacy engineering, as per, my thought process is all about, bringing the right tools, the techniques, the metrics, and the taxonomy to implement privacy by design, right? Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to reduce privacy risks and to protect privacy at scale, right? So that's pretty much what we're trying to achieve as a part of this, and to bring that onto a structured framework and to be in a position to scale, right? That's pretty much what we're trying to do as a part of this privacy engineering framework as such, right? And it's also meant to be a process that bonds innovation with privacy by design. And by default, every IT system must provide that highest degree of privacy to personal data as such, right? And more often, privacy engineering is I would say still evolving as such, but I would say it's more on the technical side of privacy profession rather than more on the legal aspects as such, but just more on the technical side. But bringing everything together into a common platform is what this is trying to achieve right now.
Thanks, Sabri. I think the common theme that I'm hearing is it is the common language, the common taxonomy, the structured framework to kind of implement some of the privacy requirements, reduce privacy risks as such, right? So Sabri, staying with you for the next point that I would like to cover, since we talked about briefly what privacy engineering is, can you share your thoughts on what are some of the recent developments in the privacy engineering world, which can help with some of these aspects that all three of you have talked about?
Sure, most certainly, right? Privacy engineering, like privacy profession as such, it's a very continuously evolving discipline as such, right? And efforts to address privacy using technical means is very scattered and very disconnected still. There are still efforts to bring in that streamlined approach to manage this better, but still efforts are still on the way. Privacy engineering, in terms of recent developments, as you mentioned, the privacy engineering guidelines, they have been created in 2019 by ISO, ISO IEC TR 27550, information technology, security techniques, privacy engineering for system lifecycle processes. That's one of the initiatives, which is probably the starting point or the foundation which emphasizes and focuses a lot more on privacy engineering, right, to start with. And then aside to that, NIST published a privacy framework in 2020, right? And it is intended to be widely used by organizations of all sizes, regardless of their roles in the data processing ecosystem. I think Ivana mentioned about there are different stakeholders in the whole equation around the privacy aspect as such. But there are, the privacy framework, which has been defined by NIST, is to be used by different stakeholders who are processing the data. And it's also designed to be agnostic to any particular technology or a sector or a law or a jurisdiction. It's primarily, above all of this. It's going to be defining in that sense, right? And it's also about encouraging cross-organization collaboration between different parts of the organization as well, right? To be able to seamlessly be able to coordinate with each other, and be able to transfer information seamlessly, but that guidelines will be laid as a part of this framework, right? And for example, in the Indian context as such, organizations like, OECD or Niti Aayog, they are supporting emerging values framework, for example, including bias mitigation, fairness, for example, and platform accountability, etc. Right? I think for making everyone aware, workshops and trainings are continuously being organized by industry bodies like IEEE, and in fact, DSCI included as well, as a part of this initiative, creating awareness amongst the general audience in that sense. So those are some of the things which I can recollect as recent developments in the privacy engineering world per se.
Sure, thanks, Sabrina. I think it is important to be aware about some of the I think ongoing or developing standards. ISO, you talked about ISO, you talked about NIST, right? And they kind of provide that framework to have privacy engineering embedded into your processes in an organization. So Tejasvi, coming over to you and kind of continuing from where Sabri left off, right? Sabri talked about standards, frameworks, guidelines to aid with implementation of privacy. Can you talk a bit about some of the methodologies or technologies which are being used as part of privacy engineering to help implement this from a technology perspective? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, Nitin. So in fact, as you quoted already, there are overarching frameworks like NIST, which in fact I think we got a gist of. And at the outset, having to translate these frameworks within an organization requires a rhythm, which we commonly call as an operating model. And having to discover this operating model across organizations or across divisions within an organization requires constant collaboration, and in fact a set of people who are able to enable each of these cross-functional groups to collaborate. So the operating model is in fact an important aspect which I think I would stress on. And there are variants to this particular operating model. We can look at having a distributed model where in fact there will be data owners who will be responsible for managing the risk associated with personal data, or it can be centralized with in fact a privacy office having to manage the risks centrally with a specialized skill set of people. It can have a cross-functional team which includes legal as well. And somewhere I prefer to have a combination of a centralized and a decentralized model, very specifically breaking up the privacy engineering to be a centralized skill set, because it's difficult to find the skills out there in the industry, and it's still in a nurturing stage. And I can quote certain technological examples further to what Sabrina has quoted. Having to create a single view of customers, perhaps you know what is, I think you will be doing that already, using a master data management solution. So what we do using a master data management solution is having to build a single repository of customer view, who in fact are the customers, who in fact have opted for a certain set of products. Let's say in a bank, we can get to answer a question like how many customers have opted for a savings account, and what is the other products which in fact have been opted by these customers. While a customer MDM gets to answer these questions, we can further extend an MDM to be answering questions of what in fact is a single view of a preference across products for a customer when it comes to consents. So today I might be using a model where in fact consents are curated at a business owner level or a data owner level, which in fact can be at a product level. But how do I get to amalgamate all of the consents at product level to be showing up at a single view, like a dashboard? And further, how do we trickle this down to marketing or offers or offer management, data analytics groups, which in fact wrangle this data and the customer preferences through this particular single view to further funnel out and filter out customers and their preferences on having to receive the communication. So these are certain solutions which in fact are already getting into the organizations. We're getting to see steam in terms of having to embed privacy into these data models. One simple example I can quote is, I extend on the master data management solution. I prefer to use a graph database, which in fact engineers customer and lead consents together. It helps me link identities. It can help me understand who is this particular person who could not log in onto the platform or a web browser, but I'm still able to identify from the cookies if the customer has signed up for cookies, to be able to link that particular customer who is anonymous across his preferences which are already stored. So it's all about extending and engineering these technology capabilities to be able to extend the preferences of the customers across perhaps the 100 direct and indirect channels which are digitally and natively available. So these are certain thoughts through which I am able to use privacy engineering, specifically to extend on the preferences of the customers across all the digital channels.
Thanks, Tejas. I think it's really interesting to know some of the practical uses that you are actually implementing or have implemented from a privacy engineering point of view as well. Thanks for sharing those inputs. Ivana, coming back to you, I think we have started talking more about the technology side of things. We did go through what privacy engineering is. We did see some of the frameworks, some of the technologies. Any specific technologies that you have seen being used from a privacy engineering perspective, the pros and cons, and challenges and opportunities that you have seen?
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm really intrigued by what was said so far. And I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things. The first one is that I think one thing has to be clear, which is that privacy engineering, privacy enhancing technologies, data security measures, we should never see those as a gateway to data collection. And this is always, the first principles. When you ask me, Nitin, you say, the things that I see in terms of out there. To me, this is and sort of what works and what doesn't work. What kind of, to me, this is the first thing that I always say, and this is sort of my guiding principle in my work. It's really important to recognize the sort of the coding privacy into, for example, algorithms and the engineering of privacy and the deployment of privacy enhancing technologies were required. But I think it's really, really important to bear in mind, that the technology is very important, but it is sort of the human side of things and deciding what we're going to do and what we do not want to do, which that is the most important thing. And then, we move as an organization to decide, okay, this is what we want to do, and how can we have engineering and coding to support the aims that we have as an organization. This is really, really important because we are in a phase where the demand coming from both legislators, policymakers, and customers is very much around control, is very much around just collect what you need to collect, but please, be transparent with the way that you do things. So that would be to me the first point, which is very much about strategy. The second point is that one of the key things I always say to engineering teams is we've got to understand that users are not the same, right? And so there is no one-size-fits-all engineering, data engineering, privacy engineering, or privacy enhancing technologies, or that works for everyone. And this is very important, for example, when it comes to issues like consent, when it comes to issues like transparency and explainability and in algorithmic systems, for example. Take an algorithmic systems, we have to start and we have to produce models they're transparent, but of course transparency means different things to different people. And it's so really important to understand, and privacy technology should really, and privacy engineering should really have this very much in mind, that users are not the same and we have to really cater for the different needs. So in terms of the things that are happening at the moment, obviously privacy engineers can steer a lot of these conversations around companies, because obviously privacy engineers now, what we're asking them to do together with us as privacy professionals is to really to help organizations respond to all the challenges that we have by building protections that are tailored to the operating context of the organizations, considering, who are the users that rely on the products and services that we produce, what is the culture in which they're operating. And this is where I think it's really important to bring together the sort of technical teams, product teams, legal teams, design teams, HR teams. This is where the new conversations absolutely need to happen. The thing that I also wanted to mention is around the technologies that can be developed, and understanding really that there is no one-size-fits-all policy that can address the problems that we're trying to address. And we really have to consider things in a particular context. I always like the example of differential privacy. Differential privacy is a standard, that, for example, algorithms need to meet. And the standard is very simple. It's simply that the output of the algorithm should not depend on one particular singular record. So the way that the differential privacy works is basically to simply adding some probabilistic noise, to mask the presence of one particular record. I've been working a lot of differential privacy and in the context of privacy engineering. So where you, for example, you add a little bit of noise to a count which is exact to make it differentially private. However, it needs to be bear in mind that differential privacy does not provide the blanket protection for all sensitive information. So it's really important to make a choice, which is a choice that needs to be made by different teams coming together. Trade-offs need to be navigated, and it's really important to understand that there is no one-size-fits-all policy out there that can be simply taken and deployed. This is why I always urge the conversations to happen between different teams, and it's really important to understand that something can look absolutely fantastic, but then it does have consequences. It does have trade-offs that need to be navigated, and ultimately, this calls into consideration the ethics of a company. Because ethics is all about navigating trade-offs and make choices in a very accountable way. So the point being, Nitin, is that there is no magic solution. The solution becomes important and becomes viable when it's taken in an accountable way, when it brings together different teams, where the trade-offs are navigated in a transparent way, and when organizations understand that what is really important is to really focus on where do we want to go, what is that we want to safeguard, what is that we want to protect, and therefore what is the technology that can help us support this.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. I think the point that you made about privacy being contextual, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the situation can be the same, but the company, depending on the context, the sector, the solution can differ, and that's something that we should keep in mind. So I think moving on Tejasvi, coming back to you again, right? You talked about how privacy engineering, you gave a couple of examples how you can have consolidated views from an internal perspective about your customers and what kind of consents they have given and what kind of offers you can make to customers, right? If you look at it from a customer perspective, what are your thoughts on how privacy engineering can bring some real world value to these customers? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's a great question, Nitin. Specifically, I think engineering technology and solutions are in fact extending organizations to be able to service customers within their specific rights of privacy, and that's taking a risk-based approach. But today, without a law within India, I think there are organizations, there are privacy officers which in fact are taking a business or a benefits-based approach rather than a business-based approach, which in fact translates to customer trust, as well as having to organize firms around being data trust themselves. So specifically taking my example, while I manage data management and governance, but I would not want to specify the models I use within my organization. But at the outset, I think for me, people, process, tech capabilities, having to bring out customer outcomes, having to build this trust was in fact an epitome of the capability model. If I have a maturity model across a data office, I have buckets of 1 to 5. 5 being data being actively managed and governed. Now I have a 6th lever out there, which actually says the organization being considered to be a data trust by the customers. And I think we are working towards having to execute on this roadmap to actually traverse that particular 6th level that we have set for ourselves. And at the outset, there is a privacy engineering team which thinks through this along with the privacy ops. And there are certain technology aspects which in fact are helping us gain steam over this. And specifically, it's the outreach to the customers, right? Having to understand the single view of consents, understanding further on which customers are interested in having to receive a particular set of communication about a certain set of products. And an organization having to sensitize internally about what are the sensitivities of the customers and what are those specific products which they would want to receive communication on. That is something if the divisions are able to achieve, they would be able to create that factor of trust. And having to put a medium out there, either in the form of a web page or in the form of a native channel like a branch for a financial services or a walk-in center, specifically I think which is common to us in India. Having the customers walk in and specifically state that this is what I'm comfortable with having to receive communication on. This is certain personal data, like a date of birth, which I might not be interested in having to have the organization process to send me marketing. And having this outreach being provided to the customers through various digital channels as well as native channels is quite important. And that is something which can be quite useful when it comes to a customer standpoint. And at the outset, I would like to quote 2 aspects. First thing, as Ivana quoted, there needs to be an overarching policy if there is a law, or there needs to be a guidelines or a best practice within the organization, which says that customer personal data needs to be respected, needs to be processed in a way that the customer rights are being respected. And in either of these 2 aspects, we still need to bring awareness across the organization. And having to build a simple bot, which in fact lets people or business analysts, for example, enter the bot, they put in something like a customer phone number, or a nominee name or a nominee address as a data element, having to identify, or the bot coming back and telling them whether this is personal data or is it sensitive personal data, which law actually states it is so. Is it the Indian IT Act or is it the GDPR? Now, this is something which can build awareness across Indian organization. Now, does it include lots of effort? I don't think so. But these are simple technological changes which in fact can bring awareness within the organization, and this awareness can be translated to the customers as the internal organization gets to, build a control environment around privacy. So these are certain thoughts that I have.
Yeah, thanks, Tejas. I think it is interesting to look at it from a customer perspective as well. So, Sabri, coming again back to you, in your experience, I think from a digital transformation perspective or running digital transformation programs, how do you see privacy engineering help you with that? What are some of the challenges that you have seen? Maybe best practices that you have seen being used to overcome those challenges. Can you share some thoughts on that?
Sure. Well, thank you, Nitin, for that. I mean, digital transformation is no longer on the sidelines, and it's become very mainstream now. Pretty much every organization has realized that if they don't embark on this, they are irrelevant. So they are really aggressively pushing on with this agenda, right? And actually, this has given rise to these organizations adopting new technologies, very aggressively. And naturally, it has given rise to an explosion of data, right? And this is one thing on the positive side, that they have a lot of things to analyze, data mine, and take informed decisions based on that. But at the same time, giving them a headache around how do you manage all of that explosion which is coming out in terms of the data explosion, right? And this is where I believe privacy engineers have a very pivotal role to play, to ensure that privacy considerations are integrated into the overall ethos of the organization, into the product design in itself. Right? And overall privacy engineering leads to better products, significantly influencing companies' bottom line overall in terms of lesser headaches, in terms of lawsuits and all of that kind of things as well, effectively. Right? And it is also gained much more important as a result of various laws like IT Act and GDPR and things like that as well. Right? And experts, more or less, have predicted that privacy will be an integral part of the technology revolution, right? And those who have integrated privacy into the product life cycle have a very good chance of progressing ahead much faster than the rest, because they've taken into consideration, and in the fundamentals itself, right? And but aside to this, there are a lot of challenges which comes along the way, because it's easily said than done, right? For example, let's look at the challenges which are typically coming to the fore. Right? One is, you can't protect what you don't know, right? It's like you don't know what you don't know, right? So in most organizations, sensitive data is proliferated across various different locations, different on-premises, in the cloud, and then with managed service providers, etc. Right? The challenge is around finding the data, understanding its origin, the flow it takes from the time it is entered to wherever it is ending up with the downstream systems and things like that, right? And tracking that in itself is a nightmare for a lot of organizations, right? And this is where system integrators, they have a nightmare job. I'm sure Ivana would appreciate that. A lot of people in the organization would be focused on understanding the data flow in itself from end to end. That in itself is a significant job, right? And for traditional legacy systems, retrospectively baking privacy back into the systems is a nightmare as well, because they're already designed with that, not with that foresight in place. So it's retrospecting that is a big nightmare, right? And also there is always this big tug of war between data privacy and data usability, right? Because there's always this fight with marketing teams and sales teams who always come back and say, I need to collect this data to be able to sell more, etc., right? And then the questions asked by the other side of the people, the other side of the business, do you really need to do this? And it's just finding that right balance between usability and data privacy, right? And protecting sensitive data without inhibiting business processes. At the end of the day, that should be the foremost, right? And also, there are no defined standards or best practices on how to integrate privacy into the software development lifecycle just yet. Right? I know there are efforts in place, the efforts are ongoing, but as such, there's nothing structured just yet. Right? These are some of the challenges that I can see are some of the ones which organizations are facing right now. But going back to the best practices as such, there are certainly organizations that have overcome some of these challenges. For example, they have incorporated privacy impact assessment across the organization to understand the purpose of why they collect the personal data and processing and how they are processed across the various channels as well, the digital channels, etc. So they look at that as well, which has helped them to understand and streamline what they're collecting, why they're collecting, right? And also, for example, they've implemented cookie notices as well to clearly articulate the fact why they're collecting, how they're going to use that information, etc. Right? And again, privacy policy information, which is, more often, we close our eyes and click that tick box to say, okay, fine, there is one mandatory tick box to be done as a part of this flow. But then there lies this 20-page document which talks in depth about privacy as such. So it has to be, people who have made it easier for the common people to understand, they've got a better way ahead on some of these things as well, right? And also, trust framework should be built, should be there between the layers across, the people, the processes, and the technology, right? Because more often, that once that trust framework is established, it's a lot more easy, right? And also from a people capabilities perspective, organizations which have embarked on training, internal customer privacy policies, data accuracy, entertaining, customer requests for a holistic view of where their data is going, how they're processing, they've got a better chance of overcoming some of these issues as well, right? And last but not the least, customer consent plays a key role here. More often, it's very important to ensure that you get the their data is a safe asset with them for providing better services.
Sure. Thanks, Sabri. And I was just keeping a tab on the time. We are running out of time, so I'll just go to the Q&A box for just to see if there is one question we can pick up, and then we'll wind it up.
Sure.
I think there are two questions which I see which are relevant for this panel. How to engineer privacy by design in application. I think we kind of addressed that through some of the various discussions that we have had so far. So I'll skip that part. The next one is an interesting one. So I'll maybe throw it open to the panel and see who wants to take this. Is there a checklist, or what are the checklists for privacy by default? Right? And if anybody wants to take that, that will be the last question, and then we'll start winding up in a minute or so. So the question is to the panel: what are the checklists which can be used for implementing privacy by default or privacy by design? So, any takers for this?
I'll probably give it a stab. I think some of the best practices, whatever I mentioned, typically come into that, in terms of doing. Have you done a privacy impact assessment of the data, what you're collecting, why you're collecting, and have you mapped that data flow end to end? So prepare a mapping of data flow across each of the stages, where it is coming, where it is being processed, where it is going to end up. Have you looked at all of that? So that will be a part of your assessment too, right? And also ensuring that you clearly articulate how customers' data is being processed and in what areas it is going to be used. I think using all of that, you'll be able to ensure that it is ticking all the boxes as such. Right? I would probably start off with that.
Sure. Thanks, Sabri. Okay. So I think since we have run out of time, I think we'll kind of wrap it up over here. I don't want to prolong it too much as well. So thanks, Ivana, Sabri, Tejasvi, for sharing your insights. We did cover what privacy engineering is all about, and then we went into some of the practical aspects, methodologies, technologies as well, right? And I see quite a few, I would say, important and interesting points come up. We talked about privacy engineering being the common language, standards which can help ensure that everybody talks about the same thing, and it's implementable across industries as well. Collecting and processing data in a transparent manner, in an accountable manner as well, having the right set of operating models. So to wrap it up, what I can think of is that we have seen that privacy engineering can help implement some of the privacy principles that are there in most, they're there inherently in most of the privacy laws. But I think beyond that, privacy engineering can help drive innovation, and especially digital innovation, now that we have seen that most companies are going towards digital transformation programs through a combination of methodologies, tools, techniques, processes from a privacy engineering perspective. So I think with that, again, I would like to thank the panel. Thank you to the audience for listening to us. And Sukrit, I'll hand it back over to you to wrap it up. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, and
Thank you so much, Nitin, Sabri, Tejasvi, and Ivana. It was a great session, and we really look forward to engaging with all of you again in due course in time. So thank you so much for taking out time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone. And thank you, everyone in the audience.